It's thinking. There we go. We're now recording.
Hello, welcome everybody in Wellington, New Zealand, to the rest of the world, and we have some folks in person here as well because we'll go for drinks afterwards. This is our end of year meetup. We're very lucky to have a case study from New Zealand here with Cam today, and so we won't have a meetup in December. Next one will be with Troy McGuinness in February, and he will talk about data-driven coaching, team metrics that don't suck. So everybody, welcome back in February, and in the meantime, we will have a summer break in Australia and New Zealand. Daniel, do you want to say some words from Australia?
Yeah, g'day. There's not much more to add than that. Yeah, I think we've had a fantastic year of meetups this year, even though we got COVIDed. Just special thank you to you, Silke, for helping to organise so many awesome meetups, and we've had so many sensational speakers this year, and I think next year we'll probably continue doing that, and hopefully here in Australia we can start to get back together again next year. But until that's absolutely okay, you know, we're going to continue with the online stuff. Yeah, so thanks, Silke.
Awesome. And when it's all done, you will travel to Wellington or to Australia every week or something like this to get to meet up. Okay, awesome. So I would say over to Cam.
Cool.
Yep, from InternetNZ. He is product manager, and we work together at DIA and at InternetNZ. But you can tell.
Yeah. I'll try and cover some of that stuff as well. So, so kia ora koutou. Welcome to Internet New Zealand. I'm Cam Findlay. I'm the product development manager here. For those of you who don't know what Internet New Zealand does, we fly a little bit under the radar, but effectively we run New Zealand's domain name. So has anyone got a .nz domain name in the room or in space? If you've got one of those, basically we're looking after you. And so we're the wholesaler of all .nz domains. So we run a very large registry, and we run the DNS layer for the internet within New Zealand, which effectively has 100% uptime requirement for it. So if you want to talk about high availability, yeah, we got that. So the other thing we do as well on the side of that is we do product development. Broadly, we're all about helping New Zealanders harness the power of the internet. And we have two strategic goalposts. We are all about an internet for all and an internet for good. And when we do product development, we try and angle all of our product development to fit between those two goalposts, basically. So in terms of products, other than our domain names and our registry, we run the New Zealand broadband map. So that's effectively, to put it simply, if you're interested in what type of internet is available at a location of interest to you, we run that, which is a huge data pipeline out the back connecting to sort of 40-odd network providers, and we do a bunch of heavy lifting data stuff with that to make it really easy for the end user just to, I live here or I'm interested in moving there, tell me what my options are effectively. We're also getting more and more into the digital identity space as well, because effectively, you know, we're a not-for-profit as well. We're not government. We're neutral, trusted, because we already run. You might want to mute that, Silke.
Just muted.
There we go. That's better. Thank you. Yes, digital identity. So, you know, in that digital identity space, you kind of need neutral, trusted bodies within that ecosystem. And so we're already one of those for something else. So we're starting to look at, well, what part might we have to play in that space as well? So we've been doing a whole bunch of customer and market validation work, which is sort of the bulk of what I'm into at the moment, effectively. So I run a development team, and we've just added a UX design to that mix as well. We've also got IT operations, and that's within the product space. But more broadly, we also run a policy shop. We do a lot of lobbying to government to make sure when they make laws about the internet that they don't do silly things. So we're big in that space as well. And we've got a comms function and a whole bunch of different functional teams. And why this is important will make sense shortly. Cool. But anyway, so I've been here probably just over a year. I came from the Department of Internal Affairs, where I was working with Silke earlier. Got here, very little even agile going on here at all. The only team that was doing anything remotely like that was effectively the development team who were doing Scrum. And that's it. Every other team was sort of to-do lists and who knows, doing whatever they needed to do to get things done effectively. So yeah, the Scrum days. So that's what I kind of walked into. I've been around the block in quote unquote agile for a long time. Sort of knew what was going on there. Very textbook. Sort of brought in by a consultant. Yep, you're doing Scrum now. Cool. Read the book, follow the rules. You'll be fine. It'll all be magic. And it was good, but it wasn't magic. And so, textbook stuff. We had the usual sort of sprints with, and if you can see there, it's kind of like to do. The first column after that is blocked. So that, that tells you something. And you'll know these burn down charts, so you can see what we affectionately call dog's legs going on there. So, things taking a long time and, oh shit, the sprint's coming to an end, we better actually deliver some things. We were sort of, some sprints were going really well, other sprints would blend into other sprints, which would blend into other sprints. And, we would constantly kind of fail sprints if we're talking traditional Scrum. And I've seen this before, and really the issue here is the method we were using to get work done didn't fit the mode of the team, is kind of what was recognized here. And so we had an experiment. They'd never heard of Kanban before, so I didn't mention that to start with. I just sort of said, hey, we're going to change how we do things. We're going to just, I'm going to set up a new view of your Scrum board, and we're going to just try this out. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. We'll just try it for a month and see how it feels. And so that's what we did. So we set up the first sort of Kanban board. They didn't know it, but that's what it was. We started playing with whip limits and just sort of like easing them into that space, really, even without talking about the practices and the principles and all that kind of stuff that comes with Kanban method. I literally just said, hey, experiment, let's try something for a month and see what happens. Side note, so I've done this before over at DIA. So we set up a dev and a design and content team, two separate teams with Kanban service flows across each other's spaces. And we also played, we stumbled into flight levels almost because we had team level boards. And then myself as a lead product owner at that time, roadmaps, and that's actually the way we were doing roadmaps actually started to form the basis of actually what was flight level 2, basically that coordination layer. We didn't call it that, but the way that all the various product owners were interacting to coordinate the teams was very, very flight level 2. And then the management team at DIA and the government digital office, which is where I was working at the time, they sort of keep spotting us at Kanban meetings as stand-ups in the morning, and we looked really engaged and interested, and they really wanted some of that. And so actually helped them to produce a strategic level Kanban flow for them, which was a roll-up. It was more sort of KPIs showing how well they were tracking against really high order goals and things like that. And I think you remember we sat on sort of an end bench table with the management team with, colored pens and paper and produced this like first cut Kanban board. And then someone built another one and laminated it. And then that thing got carried around governance meetings and a 13-story building all over the place. So it was, really interesting. So I kind of knew what was going on at the Kanban lens down at the doing space, but this other stuff just naturally fell out. And it wasn't till later that I started to get more into the scaling and the strategic lens on Kanban and the fractal nature of it, that I was like, holy shit, we've been doing this all along and we didn't even know it. Cool. But really good outcome over in that business unit. We managed to sort of shrink down our customer lead time by almost 30%. Just by introducing a Kanban flow, squashing work in progress, and just getting work to flow across the team. So that was like pretty significant. And especially doing that in a government setting was actually quite good. No idea what's going on over there now, though. We'll move on. Back to my Kanban experiment. So we were using Jira. And those of you that know that Jira likes to sort of keep data on everything that's going on. We weren't using the data as a team, but I knew that it was there. And so I would go and look at it and sort of like use it as a bit of a steer for what was going on. And I've just circled here. So you can kind of see leading up to about November into December, that's when we ran our experiment, and you can see quite a distinct change in data there. So we've got kind of a big wide variation leading up to that. As soon as we started to do our work in progress limits and shrink down, you can see that variation. If you know Jira's variation color on its control charts, it all squished down. We became a little bit more stable, more predictable, and we got our lead time down to about 7 days with a 7.5 day variation either way, basically, which was quite cool. So good experiment, basically. And so we thought, well, I'll let you folk in on a secret. We've just been doing Kanban, and we started to actually explain a bit more about the method at that point, and people kind of really into it. So so that was really cool. And then next up, we decided to get some formal training because everyone liked it. We were getting good results. And so we went and did a TKP session, the whole team, basically. We got upskilled in the space and ran a static session to basically get our first cut Kanban systems, other than the pseudo experiment board that I had set up effectively. So here's some lovely pictures of post-it notes. You all know how this goes. So we spent a couple of days as a team with Silke as our facilitator, just really unpacking our current state of play. And doing a bit of a mind shift around services and service thinking. The biggest sort of mind shift that we had as a team was when we went into the room to start with, and we were asked, cool, so what are your services? A lot of our team said, oh yeah, New Zealand broadband map, domain names, that's our services. And we weren't thinking about actually what service are we delivering. We were thinking about service out to manifesting in a product, basically. And it wasn't until we started to actually unpack what we did, what the actual work was, that we're like, oh, hang on a minute. No, we do development services, and we do peer review, code review, and we do research, technical research, and oh, right, so we can offer this to internal customers now. Great, cool. So there's a huge mind shift there across the development team as to actually what they did, which was very cool. Let me just go back one. So here's our team putting up the very first physical Kanban board in Internet New Zealand. We took up an entire wall, blocked the sun out from the kitchen, which we got a lot of stick about. So eventually we got rid of that. But we went tried and true old school paper post-its just to get the first cut thing going. And the thing looks completely different now because of the evolution of this thing over a year, right? But this got us going. And so we moved completely out of Jira, didn't touch Jira, all to paper-based stuff to start with, just to get the theory down and get it really, really humming. So, yep. So we had a few different things. So there's like a product development board there, sort of manifesting really, really shonky stuff, but it works. We had a data pipeline that was feeding that. We had what was called our triage pool, for those of you that use that sort of language, probably more like options or backlog or whatever. And then we actually had this idea of upstream Kanban already because we had a idea validation practice. We were using the Lean UX approach to hypothesis testing effectively. So, and you'll see on this, it's pretty small, but there's like a little cloud there at the end of our testing flow. And over here you can see the triage pools, but actually they were on two boards that butted up against each other. So nothing would cross the threshold across into product land until we'd validated the thing using the Lean UX practice, which is really cool. We're still using that methodology and we're augmenting that at the moment with our new UX design capability that we've just added literally 3 weeks ago. So, so we're working out how all that works at the moment. Cool, but this was good, this worked well, and you can see work in progress limits because we can physically only fit 2 canvases on there. So it forced us to only do 2 things at a time effectively, and then run a few experiments of that. Cool, and you'll note here in our lovely Jira data, what happens when you don't use Jira? It flatlines. And so you can see here, just before the circled area was our experiment. Then we moved to paper in January, completely set Jira adrift, and we were just manually calculating our lead times. Well, I say we, I was. Yeah, so that's kind of how that shows up in the data. But I just always find it interesting when you start playing with levers, actually what happens in the data. It's in the past, I've been a developer and a web geek and really across web analytics, and used to love sort of playing with things on the screen and different architectures and seeing what happens in the data. And now I'm doing that at like a team level. It's like analytics for humans. It's great. And then we have one of these things. So just think. So we've just rolled out a paper-based Kanban board, and we're told that, hey, go home. Don't come back to work unless it's for a super emergency. Now we do run critical infrastructure for the country, so we do. Some of our team are actually critical workers, essential workers, so they do come in and make sure the internet doesn't fall over for New Zealand, which is quite important when everybody's at home. And so we had to. So we went from Jira to paper. Yeah. So if that's going to move forward, back to Jira, because it was a very quick scramble as to, okay, we're all distributed now. We're used to working co-located. What do? We've got Jira. Okay, let's go back to Jira and just basically squash our Kanban that we had set up back into Jira. Actually, I tell a lie. For the first week, I ran into the office, took photos of the board and put them on Slack for everybody until we got our Jira back up and running effectively. So yeah, so we were back in the digital realm for our Kanban again. Cool. And look what happens to the data. It goes back down and into that space that we were previously in our kind of our pseudo experiment earlier. Again, it's that whole thing I just really love seeing, like what happens when you do things, and the result in the data is really cool. It's quite obvious as to what's going on here. You can also see when we completely abandoned Jira in this photo too. Cool. And just making sure, there we go. Cool. So we're using Jira. Most of our tech teams were using Jira at the time. But actually, across the rest of the org, a lot of teams were using this tool called Asana, which is kind of, I sort of colloquially call it the Fisher-Price of project management. It's sort of very simple, cards on columns, and very flexible. It doesn't really enforce workflow, so you can kind of do whatever the heck you want in it, for better or for worse, effectively. But it's a great tool, and it was the tool that everybody else was in. And being a product team, if you've ever worked in product, we have to collaborate with everybody to get stuff done. So the best tool is the one that everyone was using at the time, effectively, for us, because we needed to, tee things up. We're all remote. Suddenly digital is way more important. I can't just walk across the corridor and tap comms on the shoulder and say, hey, we've got a thing. Not going to happen. So we had to come and switch tools partway through. So we went into lockdown about March. We shifted to Asana about May, while we were still sort of in the sort of tail end of lockdown. Asana doesn't do data. So back to the manual data. So so I was just rocking Google spreadsheets, and basically every Friday at Friday drinks, everyone's in the kitchen drinking. I'm tapping data away until I can leave and go and have a drink with them. But I found that really quite useful, because it really got me under the hood on how the data all actually comes together. Like doing it manually, you can actually really appreciate what's going on and really understand it a lot better. So so if you've never manually calculated a CFD chart, I highly recommend it, as sucky as it is. But it was really useful for my understanding of the data and the metrics that roll out of Kanban. So so that was cool. So we got that going for a while, and eventually, hooray, I managed to convince us to get into some better dashboards. So probably a couple months ago, 3 months maybe, we adopted Nave, which many of you have probably come across or heard about. It plugs into a lot of different tools. One of those just happens to be Asana, so we were quite lucky there. So suddenly we got eyes back on the data that we'd lost out of Jira, which was quite good. So, and a big shout out to Sonia as well from Nave, helping me get this across our security team's desk effectively. So awesome stuff.
To watch it.
Yeah. So, so this has been really great. So we've got good Kanban set up in Asana. We've got data flowing again. So that's been working really well. And now we've got data, hooray, as a team. So how are we using that at the moment? Side thing, I don't know if you folk have probably seen this around the flow and resource efficiency.
Stuff.
Yeah. This is always a good one I roll out here across the org, getting people to think about the sort of fallacy of being resource efficient effectively. But our product team really, we did focus on that flow efficiency, which is quite rare sometimes in orgs. It's all about how much can I sort of use my resource, and that resource is a human being. So yeah, but it's your customers really that's important to get stuff in their hands. We've been using the Monte Carlo stuff out of Nave quite heavily because we've got a good sort of 6 months worth of data sitting in there now, and we can get some pretty awesome, reasonably accurate forecasts. I just ran this recently because we were sort of looking at, right, how many weeks till Christmas break? Run the simulation, cool, we can get this much done. And we're using that to actually have chats with senior leadership as well, just so that we can negotiate actually what's feasible to get done, and just being realistic about it, basically. No point overburdening folk, it's not helpful. So that's been really good. And the other thing that's been really useful as well, so I really like the Nave tool. So you've got things like the arrival rate and the throughput rate. Those are quite good. We started to find in our data that our arrival rate kept shrinking, and our throughput rate kept going up and up. And we were getting to a point of starving our teams a little bit. That was actually the trigger point for me using that data to go and hire a UX person to start doing the upstream to feed the downstream. So we actually used, the data was signaling to us, you need to do something, and the something, when we sat down and looked at it, was, right, we need to integrate some UX upstream to start validating more and feeding the team. So we took a data-driven approach to that decision, basically, which is really cool. Other things I like to look at as well is like average work in progress age, because we've got our cycle time over here. So 85% of our work is delivered in 11 days or less, so nice confidence interval there. When I start asking questions or seeing where we can help more is, you'll notice in this one, the average age of work in the system at the moment is about hitting the limit of the 85%. So that's telling me as that stuff starts to finish, actually it's going to start increasing potentially our cycle time there with the variation. So when that gets up to hitting that, that's sort of a trigger for me to go, okay, do you need more resource? Do we need to play with the WIP limit? It's like, well, there's a signal and we need to do something. So we quite often look at this as a team and pick bits out and kind of make use of the data to make calls on stuff, or at least get signaled that we need to do something. So here's the numbers from basically May through November last year through to now. Again, we were running Scrum, but because the Scrum data was being captured into the control chart in Jira, we could treat it like Kanban metrics, basically. And so when you play with that, the lead time when we're doing Scrum, as you would expect, is somewhere around 2 weeks, because
guess what?
Sprints. Yeah. And then when we went to pseudo kind of Kanban, or proto-Kanban, as you mentioned, down to 7 days, 7.5 days variation. When we went to the paper-based and started to sort of do the manual calculations, over lockdown, we were hyper-focused because we actually dropped every other thing other than what was critical. So we got super hyper-focused. That lead time actually shrunk way down because we didn't have all this extra stuff to work on. So that was really cool. And then sort of sitting at the moment, we've sort of stabilized at around delivery of stuff on average in 7 days. with a bit of a sort of an 8-day, 85% confidence sort of variation bump there. So we're still delivering stuff sort of around 85% of the stuff's within 15 days, I think it is, yeah. But that's the 7 days has been really stable for a long time, and the variation is slowly decreasing as well, which is actually what you want. So that's been really good. So yeah, so we've been able to make quite a radical shift in how we're operating in a 12-month period, basically, which has been awesome. And that's just one team. We haven't sort of fully scaled out across our entire org yet. We're doing that kind of organically at the moment, although we're starting to get the eye of other folk higher up in the org, having some chats up at that layer as well. Might get a bit more buy-in and movement on this, which would be cool. But actually, a lot of the teams have just been singing out for a great way to do their work, and you sort of go, well, have I got the thing for you? Which is really good. So, as we know, Kanban keeps evolving. We don't just stop there. So this is new. This diagram is literally done yesterday. We have hired some UX design capability now. And so we've kind of started to work out how we do the upstream. And so we haven't fully solved it yet because of yesterday. But we're thinking about, okay, you know, we've got our product development team that are doing coding services and that kind of service. We're going to have a UX design service, which is validating, testing, doing design work, which will be feeding the development boards. But actually, the devs and the designers actually work cross teams quite a bit as well. A lot of the devs want to be really involved early in the design work, so there's a lot of collaborative activity that goes on there. And the design folk want to be there to support the devs when they need to make design decisions more on the fly, because that's just what happens sometimes. So yeah, so we're just kind of thinking about how we integrate an upstream for our wider product team now. So this is still work in progress, and we're just sort of fleshing out in Asana how the heck we do this. So Asana has its certain quirks and limits, and we're just making it work effectively. So I think one of the things we're missing the most is Asana doesn't do swim lanes, which is
what I thought when
tricky because we love swim lanes. But what they do have is custom fields with quite visible sort of bubbles and little pill-shaped things of colors. So we've been able to do things like service classes and represent the state of play in a particular stage, like doing and done within reviewing, using that. And it's quite visible. I don't have one on here, but if you've ever seen Asana, it's you can make do with it. You can kind of lose the swim lanes and not really miss them all that much, to be honest.
It looked a lot like Trello.
It's very Trello-esque. Yeah, exactly. Cool. We're working with more teams across the organization to adopt Kanban method. So very slowly, just kind of dropping by teams. Hey, we need a thing. I got a thing. Let's talk about a thing. Let's talk about Kanban. And so we've run a few sort of, I guess you'd call them pseudo-statics. Not a thing, but I'm making it a thing. Just to get people going, we're getting them to sit down, map out their work and do some of the small parts of static, just so that they know, oh, here's what all of our work types look like and what are the workflows that actually would span off this, and getting a first cut of a board and some whip limits and just some of those basics in play quite quickly. So we've done that for our community team, comms team, and last week I just worked with our policy team to do that as well. So they do all very varied and different work, as you can imagine, but the flexibility of a Kanban method, it just fits everything. And because it's all based on these things, principles, it's actually been quite helpful because teams that are doing Kanban, that go talk to another team that's doing Kanban, can understand each other's worlds quite quickly because it's all stemmed from a common set of way of doing. And so they might work completely different, but you can still get them when you go over and interact. So it's made the flow between teams a little bit quicker as well, because we can come over and talk the same language and kind of get it done. So we're starting to get this sort of like network model going where we've got functions still, but we're smoothing the flow between the functions to get an outcome at the end, basically. So
that yours on the right hand of your network?
No, it's not. It's one I sort of borrowed from somewhere. Just
It
to
looks like Kanban University.
quite possibly. Here's a boat. Other things for getting buy-in. So I'm not sure if many of you have done the Klaus Leopold boat building simulation. This thing is gold. Really good. Really low-fi. You can do it in a room with 8 folk and some sheets of paper. When you do the data analysis part on a whiteboard, you get a lot of buy-in and switches of minds in the room. Really, really useful. So highly recommend this particular exercise. We ran this with a group which was a few folk from our SLT, a few other folk from different teams as well, and just had a really good time. Everyone came out of that going, cool, we get pull-based now, we understand. And so that's actually unlocked a lot of conversations here at this org to start implementing some more of this stuff, which has been really good because we want to see what we can do with it. Cool, and we just keep evolving. We've basically just, we're running regular retros. Our team are interested in workflow, and when things get gummed up, they want to see if they can fix it. It's driven a whole bunch of really interesting behaviors in our development team and wider, which has been really, really cool. So so we're just going to keep moving, keep evolving, and see where we get to with this. And I hazard to bet if you come back in another 12 months, we'll be somewhere completely different. Maybe we'll do this talk in 12 months' time and see what happens. That's how I set up next year's meetup, by the way.
Can play it now.
Exactly. Cool. And I think that is everything from me. Happy to take a few questions and stuff. And then once we've done that, the folk in the room here, we might pop out for a beverage somewhere.
Yeah, thanks, Cam.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I have like a little surprise for everybody. Like everybody actually, because we will be virtual again in February. I just created a Kanban New Zealand YouTube channel, and I put up the meetups that we had this year, where at least those that were more talks and not interactive, and those where I actually had the MP4, so they are up there, and this talk will be up there as well. If you Google Kanban New Zealand YouTube, you will find it, and I hope it's gonna grow over the next year. And thanks to Internet New Zealand for having us here.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome setup.
Yep.
And maybe are there questions?
Yeah, happy to take questions from the floor or remote.
Yeah, just unmute and shout out. Someone wants to join.
Some time zone difficulties.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, thanks, John.
Data session.
Hi, it's Becky from Australia. I just want to congratulate you. I think, anywhere in the world that you are, that you take the journey and have the courage to be a leader and create better ways of working for everybody's lifestyle is like the investment that we make back into everybody's lives and everybody's ways of working to have that, that stable and consistent thing that makes a difference to people's lives outside of work as well. So just from another leader to another leader, just encouraging you and say keep going, because there's the silent thing, and it's probably not till you leave an organization as you appreciate that everyone goes, oh man, that person was so good, they were a leader, and they never appreciate till you really leave about how much difference you're making. So be encouraged. It's a great example. It's a great example.
Excellent. Kia ora, Becky. And probably just to jump on that too, I operate in kind of the product space. I have worked in the kind of more delivery and kind of coaching space in the past, but I'm really, product is where I operate these days. And in quite a lot of teams, how the team works gets kind of ignored, and it's just all about talk to customers and do the product thing and deliver the thing, and they'll deliver it, it'll be fine. And you burn teams out and all this kind of stuff. And my lens is really, if you want to serve the customer really, really well, you've got to have a really good, well-watered team, because they're the ones that are serving the customer at the end of the day. So if you have to look after them first. By doing that, you're actually treating the customer first. It sounds a bit backwards, but because everyone's like customer first, and if I'm a pure product guy, it's all about the customer, but the customer gets served by the team who's delivering the service. So you've got to look after them as well.
So they are your customer.
Yeah, exactly. So so I spend a lot of time, I still do all the producty stuff, but I'm really passionate about getting the team really humming as well, because that's a huge asset to the way we do product here, basically. And we're quite lucky that, like, we're a not-for-profit, so a lot of while we still have to make revenue to cover what we do, and the revenue from our product space feeds our policy and all of our public good work that we do, where we give away a lot of grants for research on the internet and all these things as well. If we do good product, we're able to make the internet better. If you have a domain name, actually the profits from the domain names get pumped back into the community. So we've got a really purposeful work here, which we're quite lucky. I'm not solely chasing a buck, basically, although it's nice. Cool, thank you, Betty.
Good for you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I do. Hello.
Hello, Sandra.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi. I think I have a two-part question, and it might not be in quite the right order.
Yeah.
The first part, Cam, is you've mentioned that there are other teams that are curious. So the two-part question is around which teams at InternetNZ have been curious to use Kanban. Is it just sort of your product tech IT, or is it even the business? And how is their curiosity being supported? That's the first part. And then the second part is about flow between teams. So where your work impacts another team, have you got any flow going with Kanban? So maybe flight levels 1 and 2. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded and a lot in there.
I'll see if I can unpack that. So just to play back, so what were the type of teams that were curious? What were their nature, and how are they being supported? And then the second part was the flow side of things. So interestingly, our IT teams aren't the ones that are curious. Actually, the teams that have been curious have been our outward-facing community team, our communications team, and our policy team, and actually our research team as well, data science team. And so those have been the ones that have been most interested. And in terms of support, at the moment, it's been me sharing as much as I can about how we do in our team, and investing some time with those teams. So I've kind of got it down to a couple of hour engagement with a team, to the point where they can get a very rudimentary Kanban system up and running. It's not quite as fully featured as if you'd done a full static, and it may well be that we come back around and do a more full static in time with those teams, but they're sort of screaming out for a better way of doing things. They want to get rid of the overburdening and really see where they're at with their work, and that hasn't been happening. So it's so I've managed to sort of get it down to a bit of a fine art where I can just spend a few hours with them, and get something really basic going, and just sell that idea that you don't have to get it perfect right away, because the whole point is it's an evolutionary process. So get as good as you can get for a couple of hours, and then just start iterating and changing there. So but the more teams I work with, the more those teams are talking with other teams and other management and leadership across here, and it's starting to grow like exponentially. So after I'd done it and shared it in a sort of an all hands kind of meeting, the community team came on board, and then they started talking about the benefits they were getting. And then I got approached by other teams. It wasn't me going to those teams. So that worked really well. In terms of flow, our original board had a stage called with other teams. It was a handoff point, because we did have to interact with comms, and we have a product operations function for infrastructure. We also have a support function that does the first line kind of support stuff, and the customer interaction stuff from a technical point of view. Again, those are all separate handoff points. Interestingly, we've now fully integrated the product operations function. So we have a guy who's part of our IT operations outfit that aren't running Kanban, but he's basically now almost seconded into our team, and forms like a bit of a bridge between IT operations infrastructure and what we're doing with product. And we no longer have, with other teams, we've actually got rid of that column. His work is just our work, and his work is just coming across the board with the rest of the team. So we've actually, and that took a bit of time. That was probably a good quarter, like a good 3 months of just working out how it might work. But now we don't go, oh yeah, throw that over to IT Ops. It's actually IT Ops is here with us. The product Ops guy is here. He's in the stand-ups every morning, and we all know what we're doing. So we've done that there. And we had another one as well. Oh yeah, support function had a separate board. But often what we deliver in product, we need to check back in with a customer before it's done, to make sure actually did the customer get the benefit that we set out to. We didn't have that for a long time. We were just like, dev done, it's done. And then we'd get, hang on, customer needs thing, and then we'd load another ticket in the front and at infinitum, basically. We've now added that column back in, so there's a representation of customer support right at the end of our flow now, so we catch that. And so we've just baked that into our flow. So if you look at our product board, it's like a really interesting mix of like traditional columns you'd expect to see in a dev kind of setup, but then you've got a bunch of non-traditional columns, which are touch points and interaction points that are quite customer facing and spread across different teams as well. So we're looking at whether we can do more of that at the moment, but there'll be probably a limit in that space as to like what are the really close-knit touch points across different functions. Something like comms, that's kind of a bit harder thing. It might happen at the end, or I don't know. And actually, maybe it's more about us going and knocking at the front of the Kanban system of the comms team and making a service request to them that way. Maybe that's okay. So we're doing a little bit of that flow stuff as well. So hopefully that kind of covers your two-part question, Sandra.
It does. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Cool. Good questions.
So
Thanks,
good.
Sandra.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Maybe we'll take we've got one in real life, in space.
Okay,
How novel.
yeah, look, I don't know much about Kanban stuff as well, but I guess like the question is like with Scrum, there's like a lot of role delineation between like product stuff and the team stuff. Like when you found yourself in that mix of having to be that product person, the coach for the team, as well as the person trying to introduce or highlight the improvements the team could make. What sort of challenges or what sort of opportunities did that kind of present for you?
Time. I guess I'm lucky that I've worn many hats in the past. Not that you should always go in somewhere and try and wear 4 different hats, because that's not sustainable. But having had a background in a bunch of different roles, I mean, I could bring those different angles. Like my background is actually a software developer. I've been typing code and building stuff. So I kind of came with that lens when I came into a lot of other software development teams, so I could empathize with what's going on. And then I was sort of doing Scrum mastering type stuff. So I've sort of like grown up through the full product stack over time. And so when I got to that point where I'm sort of coming in as a product manager, but understanding the full stack and where there were gaps and where I could plug the gaps, that was really helpful. So I highly recommend trying to work, if you can, do some, it's that whole T-shaped person, right? Get some really deep knowledge in one area, but actually go wide, if you're in delivery, go learn more about product. If you're a coder, go learn about business. I think too often we get into that, like us and them. It's like, oh, I'm technical, so I don't care about the business stuff, or I'm business, that's that technical stuff. Actually, if you can span the boundaries of that, that's where all the really interesting meaty stuff happens, is in the boundaries between all the things. So broadly, my career, I've played in the middle. I've played it across the boundaries. I'm more in product now, but I've come from somewhere different. I might go somewhere different later on, who knows? But I just like challenges that don't fit into either bucket, basically. Yeah.
What does Internet New Zealand do, or I guess governance level, to sustain the culture that allows you to move outside your role and play in other spaces and influence other areas?
Yep. We're about 55 people, so we're not massive. So there's still at a manageable level of, human interaction that can happen without formalities, we'll say. And a lot of the folk that work here, because of the non-profit nature, we come here out of passion. So we're basically like 55 really passionate people about the internet, a bunch of geeks and weirdos who really love this stuff. So we've got that in common. So it's really easy to, hit each other in the kitchen and like, hey, what about this thing? Hey, I can help you with that thing. That was actually really tricky over lockdown, actually, because we're so used to like ad hoc collaboration that we've had to work really, really hard, and that we're still working on that, actually. Like I've been pulled in to form part of a work group that's looking at our flexible working arrangements at the moment. So I'm trying to feed a lot of the stuff into that to kind of see what happens when the office is just another tool, right? It's not the home base anymore. You use it for different purposes. Your hot desk, or it's all collaborative space, or and you use the right tool for the right job. Maybe sometimes you use the office for in-person stuff. Maybe you don't need the office. Who knows? We're trying to work that out at the moment, and we're sort of 6 months out of lockdown now, still playing around with that. But a lot of this Kanban stuff, in terms of how work works, that's coming along for the ride at the moment. So yeah, so watch the space. Basically, I don't have the answers, but we're going on the journey basically. So yeah, cool, nice. I think maybe we take one more.
Yeah, maybe one more question. Yeah.
Last questions, and then we might toodle off to the bar.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
No more questions.
All right. Hey, thank you, everybody.
Cool. So we will head to the pub now.
Sorry, we can't bring the screen with us, but
yeah. But if any of the Wellington people have just joined from work, feel free to join us.
You know where it is.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, and Google New Zealand.
YouTube. Kanban.
Kanban New Zealand on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Cool. All good. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Yep.